Okay, so we're continuing on with yesterday's pasuk. So let's review what we did. 1925, Leitz take o Pesi yaring. So you hit a scoffer, and the simpleton will become cunning or clever. Rebuke an understanding person, and he will understand knowledge. Okay, so questions basically were all definitions. What is a Leitz? What is Pesi? What is cunning? What is a Navon? What's the difference between hitting and rebuke? And what does it mean that the Navon will understand das? What das is he understanding? So then we went to the definitions of the Pesi. How did we define Pesi?
One who's doesn't have the or doesn't control his emotions.
Right.
And his emotions distort his
Exactly. Right. So he doesn't have the control over his emotions, and it distorts his thinking about what is good. So he's potentially able to be influenced, but not on his own.
Very easily swayed.
Very easily swayed, right? And so he's essentially he's mispate yitzro. He's seduced by his own inclinations, but that makes him receptive to other people manipulating him and seducing him and falling in with a bad crowd and stuff. But it also allows him to fall in with a good crowd. Yeah. Okay. So then that's Pesi. Okay. And then the Leitz is what?
The one who he has like aggressive sort of.
Yeah, there's an aggression, which is like a more base motive.
Right, like he feels like he's right.
Yeah, he doesn't. Well, it's interesting. That's probably true, but it doesn't seem like a primary motive. Do you remember the pasuk that defines the two qualities of him?
That like he's his own I want to say God, but like everything's revolving around him.
Yeah, so it was ego or haughtiness. So
Right.
it was the malicious aggression and the haughtiness combined. So it's Zayd, Yahir, Leitz Shemo. So Zayd is malicious, Yahir is arrogant, Leitz is his name. And so it's a combination of those two things. And then so therefore he is always going to be, so the way it expresses itself is he speaks lashon hara, he makes fun of people, he rejoices in their downfall, he wants to see them their kavod diminished. He doesn't see any blemishes in himself. All right, so then yeah.
It's interesting that you could have a guy who's like aggressive and full of himself, and he like actually does violent things.
Yeah, so that's actually the thing that we did not read yesterday, but since you mentioned it, let's read it. Let's see. All right, so let me give you back. So the packet I gave you yesterday, is it on the last page? Oh, no, it's not. All right, so it's on the second to the last page. Let me open it here. Also, Rabbeinu Yonah. This is on the second half of the pasuk that we did yesterday, which is so Zayd Yahir Leit Shemo Oseh be'evras Zadon. Okay, so the malicious and haughty one, Leitz is his name. He acts in the wrath of Zadon, of malice. Okay, so Rabbeinu Yonah this is on Reish Mem Vav. Oseh be'evras Zadon. You see it there? Yeah, okay. The guy who has these two traits of the malice and the haughtiness. Don't, this is exactly what he said, don't think that the sin of speech is are you okay with Rabbeinu Yonah? It's the only explanation. Don't think that the iniquity of speech is with him alone. But he won't sin in action. That's not true. Who will act with his fellows in the wrath of malice. Because when he gets angry at a person, he'll harm him, and he'll do with him in the act of aggression or malice. There's no anger like the anger of a bal lashon, someone who speaks lashon hara. V'gam yadua ki hagaiva tagdil hakas, and it's also known that haughtiness or ego increases anger, because anger is when reality doesn't conform to your desires and you take it out on reality. So the greater the ego, the greater the expectation is that reality should conform to your desires, and then the angrier you're going to get. So the guy who has these two midos, be angry to the point of destruction, of where he destroys. Okay, fine. So I think an example of this is like, okay, I don't know if this is actually like the best example. This is the first one that came to mind, is I bet that there are a lot of like bigoted people, whether like Nazis or white supremacists or whatever, who start off just as the Leitz, and they don't carry it out in action, but they just give in to their aggression and their haughtiness in speech. But it can get to the point where if the circumstances are right and the quantity of their anger is awakened enough, then they'll actually do something that's violent. Yeah. So it is interesting. But I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I agree with the observation you made, which is that like it starts off that he is not a violent person, but the point that the Rabbeinu Yonah is making is, or that the pasuk is making, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, is like you push him far enough, and that aggression is not going to be able to be contained or channeled just through the speech. It's going to come out in some sort of action also. Yeah. Okay, so now I mentioned yesterday that there was another Rabbeinu Yonah where he talks about the audience of Mishlei and how Mishlei is for the naar and the Pesi, but not the Leitz and the Ksil and the Rasha. And again, we read this the week before Sukkot, but let's read it again to review. So this is on that one sheet that I gave you. This is on the pasuk Mishlei Aleph Daled Laseis L'Psayim Orma. A little aggressive there. Yeah. To give simpletons cunning, naar zima, to the youth, knowledge and strategy. So just a side point here, by the way, orma, cunning, is always paired with a pesi. Okay, so just based on that, and Rabbeinu doesn't explain this, but given what we define the pesi as, what would you think orma is? What does cunning mean? Like, what is the thing that the pesi needs most?
The ability to think for himself.
The ability to think for himself. Yeah. So can we be more specific? That's true.
Like be able to distinguish between what's good and what's bad on his own.
Okay.
Or
yes. I'm just trying to think which is more primary. In other words, what did Rabbeinu Yonah say last time that the primary obstacle of the Pesi is in terms of his ability to think on his own? His taivas, right? Mm-hmm. So you could have a Pesi who could think on his own, but he's still swayed by his taivas. Right. That blinds. He said it blinds his eyes.
Mm-hmm. So Arma is being able to see past it.
Yes. So I think that's the thing, right? In other words, it's true that it ultimately is going to boil down to allowing him to think on his own, but the particular obstacle he needs to overcome is being able to differentiate between thinking that is dominated by his taivas and thinking that is coming from his intellect. Mm-hmm. That's cunning. And so cunning is a good word because cunning, like if you talk about cunning, has a negative connotation in like the arum, the nachash was arum, the nachash in Gan Eden, it was able to manipulate Chava's psyche. Mm-hmm. Knowing how emotions can distort thinking and being able to use it to manipulate others, that's what we mean by cunning. But what Mishlei means by cunning is being able to see how you are manipulated by your own emotions and being able to separate out between taiva-driven thinking and like intellect-driven thinking. Yeah.
Can a person be a Pesi in certain areas or not?
Yeah, I was thinking about that in the car after I left yesterday. That in the car, not on the car. I'm gonna go on the car. That you can be a Pesi in certain areas and not others. So let's say, for example, like there are people who are very business savvy, but let's say like in their relationships, then they're a complete Pesi, or there are people who are like, able to separate out their thinking in the area of their expertise. But let's say when it comes to spending money, then they're a Pesi, so you can, like all of Mishlei, it's not necessarily an overall personality. It's more like personality archetypes that can express themselves in different people in different ways. Yeah.
How is this cunning?
How's it cunning?
Yeah.
Because what I'm saying is cunning is the ability to see the potential in the emotions to influence your thinking. That's what it means to be cunning. So usually we use cunning in terms of how that quality allows you to manipulate other people. But the Pesi needs cunning to be able to see how to free himself from his own Yetzer manipulation.
In a way to manipulate himself. To
manipulate himself, exactly. To de-seduce himself. Yeah. Okay. So Rabbeinu Yonah. So that's answers your question. Yeah. Okay. So Rabbeinu Yonah says like this: "L'seis l'psayim arma, to give Psayim arma. Hine tchilas tchila yeda ha'adam hamutar l'kafta l'kam l'befoal v'lohechliach bo achar kacha Psayim." Okay, fine. This is referencing the previous pasuk, which is on the same page. Lakachas Musar Haskell, to take intelligent Musar, Tzedek Mishpat Misharim. So here Rabbeinu Yonah is saying first the person needs to know Musar, to take it for himself and fulfill it in his own action, and then to rebuke afterwards the simpletons. Kamosh Amr Chazal, this is a good thing that people need to remember. Correct yourself and then correct others. That's the order. Yeah. Okay. Ikar mitzvah. Yeah.
Make sure it's not correct others first.
Yeah.
You know, there's some people that I know that.
Yeah, I was wondering if am I violating this by teaching Mishlei? Like, you know. Yeah, I think we all need this help though. So, okay, so this is where we get to the point. Ikar mitzvah hatokacha, la pesi v'la naar. So the essential mitzvah of rebuke is for the pesi and the naar. La pesi, and when he says mitzvah hatokacha, I think he is talking about the mitzvah in the Torah, but I think he's primarily talking about Mishlei. Like the primary audience of Mishlei is the pesi and the naar. The pesi hu mishlo lomad chachma, mo pesayus ubal yadama. The pesi has not learned chachma. Again, this is Mishlei chachma. Pesi yami. Oh, sorry. He says pesayus ubal yadama. Naivete, doesn't know anything. Pesi yamin l'chol davar. Pesi will believe anything. Okay, fine. V'hinei kasuv al tochach letz pin yisna'eka. But it says about a Leitz, don't rebuke a Leitz lest he hate you. Okay. Im tiktosh es ha'avil v'gomer. So I think that the second half of that pasuk is if you crush an avil, a fool, with a mortar and pebble, you won't, not petty, you won't crush the foolishness out of him. I mean, you can't get it out of him. And then ba'odnik sil al tadaber, and then the second half of that is pin tavuz l'secha milecha. Don't speak in the ears of a ksil, lest he mock the intelligence of your words. And then umochiach l'rasha mumo, one who rebukes a rasha, that's his own blemish. So two people you do rebuke, the pesi and the naar. 4 people you do not rebuke, the Leitz, the avil, the ksil, and the rasha. Okay, that's the division in terms of Mishlei's audiences. V'amru zal, and Chazal say, kishem, this is another important thing to remember, kishem mitzvah al adam lomar davar hanishma, kain mitzvah shelo lomar davar shelo eno nishma. Just as it is a mitzvah upon a person to say something that will be listened to, so too it is a mitzvah to not say something that will not be listened to. That's why we typically don't rebuke people unless we know them and know that there's a chance that's going to help them. Yeah. Our pasuk that we're learning might go against that, by the way, but okay.
So,
yeah.
According to this, what should we do for all those 4?
That's a good question. So he's going to partially answer that at the end of this here, but the answer might be that there's nothing you can do. You know, that might be the answer. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. Yeah. Eddie, he'll say it soon. Okay. Al kain ein lahochia haksil. Therefore, you should not rebuke the ksil. And again, Rabbeinu Yonah's definition of ksil was the general vague one yesterday. People who are addicted to averos, to fulfill their desires, which we said is different than the Pesi, because the Pesi hasn't reached the point where he's become firmly attached to those things. He's prone to it. He might be in it for a while, but it's not like he's attached intrinsically to those things. But the ksil has like reached that point. So we said it seems to be like a quantitative difference, where like, you know, the potential that the Pesi has to change for the good has kind of been lost, you know, and because he's gotten too entrenched in his actions. So he says you should not rebuke the ksil, because the actions that he clings to are iniquities. Yeah, that's the thing. He's accustomed his soul to follow his taivas for this doesn't mean days, it means for years, right? For a long time. And these things have become second nature to him. That's the difference between the Pesi and the Navon. Pesi might be involved in following his taivas, but they haven't become second nature to him yet. Okay. The Nemar, as it says, Gam atem tuflu lahetiv limude harea. You are able to improve those who learn evil. I don't know the context of that. Now, okay, this is a good description of how the Pesi sins. Okay, this is a great description here. So someone who sins, and again, sinning here does not just mean halakhically sinning. It can mean like making any bad decision. Someone who sins the nikre by happenstance, bihis gaber hayetzer alav, when his inclination overpowers him, al pi shehu mezid, even though it is intentional. Just what's weird about that phrase there?
not intentional.
It's not intentional, right? If his Yetzer overpowered him. But this is a category of intentionality that your Yetzer overpowers you. So it's intentional in the sense that you know it's wrong and you're doing it consciously.
You allow it to happen.
But yeah, but you allowed it to happen. Okay, so in other words, like it's isn't there a phrase in Nezikin? I don't know if you guys came up with this in kind of this Rabbi Zimmer's thing of what's the phrase in Nezikin?
Like powerfully.
Yeah, powerful emaciate. Yeah, exactly, right. Where like you put yourself in a situation where let's like remember the first case I ever learned that with. I think is when you go to sleep next to like valuable like vases and like you go to sleep knowing you're gonna turn around and you're sleeping and then you break the stuff. So even though the actual action was unintentional, you put yourself in a position intentionally where you're going to be prone to doing something unintentional, you know? Yeah. So a person who is overpowered by his yetzer and sins, even though it's intentional, roy lahochicho, it is proper to rebuke him. Because since he has not yet habituated his soul to that fate, and he hasn't done it constantly, and he hasn't become attached to it, it's possible that he'll listen to the voice of the rebuke. That's also included in the Pesi. So in other words, you see that the Pesi can be someone who has reached the point where he is repeatedly falling into his yetzer and doing intentional sins because the yetzer overpowers him. But as long as he hasn't made it second nature yet, then he's still in the Pesi territory. He hasn't gone into the Ksil territory. Ksil territory is when he is no longer repeatedly stumbling, but he is attached and persists and it's become second nature. Let's review this last sentence here. Because that, and so he's harkening back to Chazal's statement that the Pesi is someone who is seduced by his yetzer. So as long as you can point to the person and say that he got seduced, he was duped in this instance, so he's still in a Pesi. But someone who is a feel like those guys I was mentioning yesterday, the gang leaders who are recruiting other people to engage in bloodshed and theft. That's not like one day like, oops, he accidentally got tempted into stealing. Like, no, that's his lifestyle, you know? Yeah, what was it?
What were we talking about? Like, were we talking about Pesi the whole time here?
Yeah. But I think what he's saying though, is he's saying he started off that last portion by saying you shouldn't rebuke the Ksil. So he was differentiating it, the Ksil from the Pesi, and he's saying that the Pesi is included as long as he's just flipping up, then he's still a Pesi. But once it becomes second nature, then that's still. That actually is what I said yesterday. I just didn't realize I got it from the Rabbeinu Yonah because it's been 6 months. Yeah, what was it?
The Ksil could like get out of his suits, right? It's just that he's not gonna be able to, like, you can't give him a.
Yeah, you can't give him Musar. Yeah. That's the thing. So I'm trying to remember if he says this. I know I read this. I know I read this when we did it in what do you call it? I know we did this when we talked about when we talked about it in Sukkot. I said it yesterday, but it's in the Rabbeinu Yonah somewhere. I'll have to look it up. But like to answer your question about how to reach the Ksil, so there's no. He's the only way he's going to change is if he let's call it learning the hard way, you know, and even that is not likely that he's going to change because one of the mistakes of the Ksil is he repeatedly experiences the consequences of his actions and it doesn't teach him stuff. But if the consequences are severe enough, then it can shake him out of it because it's not someone telling him that he's wrong. And that's why I mentioned the Rabbeinu Yonah yesterday, that if he gets to the point where he suffers the consequences and realizes it comes from his own mistake, then maybe he'll change. But as soon as you tell him that he's doing something wrong, that'll like bring up the walls of resistance and his ego won't let him hear it. Yeah. Yeah, it's really crazy. Yeah. These are such important Rabbeinu Yonahs. And see, this is why, like, I'm not against learning the beginning of Mishlei per se. It's just to get this from the pasukim is very hard. And you need the Mefarshim to guide you through this. So, like, if you want to hitch your wagon to like a Rabbeinu Yonah or a Sadigon, then that's great. You know, they'll guide you. But there's no way I can get this from the Psukim themselves. Like, this is coming from Lahavdil. I've now learned enough Mishlei that I have my own ideas of the personalities of the Pesi and the naar and all this other stuff. But like, and that's what he's doing here. But like, it's the only way to get that is by learning tons and tons of individual psukim, where you see the personality and then you get a whole picture, you know?
Is every pasuk in the first part like this, where like Rabbeinu Yonah has like a long thing?
Except for the parts that were lost. Yeah, he has long discourses in the beginning. And in fact, you know, I haven't decided yet what I'm doing over the summer, but like, I feel like this is a good type of like summer project of like going through the Rabbeinu Yonah on all of the beginning of Mishlei or something like that, you know, like there's value in doing this. I just don't think that lends itself as well to the daily format, or it's not what I want to do. I like my daily dose of Mishlei to be like a pasuk, you know. But but his style is like this for the whole first part of Mishlei, except for the part that was lost. I think it's because why was the footnote say? Oh, he does it later on. All right, whatever. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
What is Shov literally?
So I just looked this up in the Jasper to make sure I was getting it right. It means correct.
Correct.
It comes from the word. I think Shov is related to the word ms. Is the Aramaic of ms, I believe.
So that's like incorrect. Like
is.
like
To put in line with truth. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think that's where it comes from. I'm just trying to remember, and I'm close. Oh no, I know what we say. We say this somewhere in davening, or is it something we don't say? I'm trying. Oh no, I know where I hear it. I hear it when I'm in shul, and they say "Deyana Rockets" from the Zohar. Showed. I think that's a word there. We'll have to check it out afterwards to see what it says. Yeah. Okay. Let's read the second paragraph here, and then we'll go back to our pasuk. V'hinei hushar. This is on the again page Vav in Rabbeinu Yonah on the single sheet. Yeah, on the single sheet. V'hinei hushar. Page Vav. You got it? Yeah. Okay. V'hinei hushar al tochakas naar. So this also warns us about the rebuke of the youth. Afa pishu ragil b'chet yamim rabim. See, so that's interesting. That sounds like the youth is worse than the Pesi, right?
Yeah.
Because the Pesi is sinning by happenstance. The youth is ragil b'chet yamim rabim.
It's closer to the field.
Yeah, never realized that before. Because I always say that the youth is like the Mishlei neutral person, and the Pesi is at a disadvantage. But you know, if you think about it, though, we all start off as a Pesi. I mean, that's how kids are, right? Is that you lack the ability to distinguish between your emotional thinking and like you can't even really think like you know, with your intellect, and you're constantly like seduced by your yetzer, you know. So okay, fine, that's interesting. So so even though the youth is accustomed in chait for many days, so unlike the Pesi, what was the lashon used by the Pesi? Is oh no, sorry, it was the ksil. The ksil is hirgil nafsho lelechas afrei tavas yamim. Pesi is yehata b'mikre, and then naar is ragil b'chet yamim rabim.
Right. So he's not hargil. It's not show.
Right.
He's just run.
Ragil, yeah, and I don't know if that's a difference, but it is a difference in the way he says it though.
Yeah.
So mipnei shehu tachat yad avi ha'av liyatro lahakoto. So the reason why you can rebuke him is he is under the hand of his father to discipline and to strike. Meaning, and this is why I think that nowadays, then it's possible that naar, the age of naar has been expanded because people stay under their parents' influence for longer than they used to, you know?
Oh, I was gonna say the opposite. That like
You could say the opposite
now
also.
they're less under. They're not gonna get hit or whatever. Or abuse is hard.
Oh, that's also true. Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on how particular we want to be here.
Right.
Meaning like, and the other thing also is it's possible you could say that psychologically, even though youths are under their parents' auspices for more time, then psychologically you reach the point where you're not relating to your parents in the same way, even though you're under their dominion.
Right.
You know, yeah.
And I guess you could also say that like the parents might just have it wrong. But like if they're not disciplining right.
Yeah, that's certainly true. That's certainly true. It could, yeah. This is kind of assuming that your parents are
have Mishlei values.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, this is just a side idea here. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but the where did I first hear this? I think I first heard this from my Rabbi Sachs, is that Shlomo Melech knew that parents aren't always the best, most of people. So one of the reasons why he talks to the student of Mishlei as my son is because Shlomo is your surrogate parent when it comes to needing a Mishlei parent. No, obviously having a live parent who knows your particular circumstances and who actually has Mishlei Chachma and can guide you in particular is the best scenario. But for those of us who don't have it, then Shlomo's the next best thing.
But I think it's like general population.
Yeah, I think so also. Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's a lot more bad parents than good parents out there. Yeah.
So would you say that the naar is just a seal who has someone?
Yes, it sounds like it. Yeah. Or let me put it this way: he's either Ixiel who has someone who is like over him,
Yeah.
or the person who's over him is holding him back from that final step of hardening of his nature. You know, where like he's ragil in fate, but he doesn't say it's become second nature yet, and that might be because he's not independent. You know. Let's read his second description first, just to make sure we get the full picture. Vashenis, and the second reason why you do tochacha on the naar is mipnei sheyesh tikva sheyimshol b'tavaso. Yeah, there we go. V'yishana es tivo. There is hope, that's tikva, that we should do another version of hatikva, but make it about changing your nature, your single nature. That he would. There's hope that he will conquer his taiva and change his nature. Because he's still in youth. This is like what we were talking about last night. We did Chanach l'na'ar al pi darko v'gam ki askin lo yasar mimenu. Train or inaugurate the youth according to his way, and even when he's old, he won't deviate from it. And there, we actually didn't do the Rabbeinu Yonah, but Rabbeinu Yonah there says it's like if you have a small tree, then you can like create like a framework or like influence the way it grows. And it'll grow in a different direction. Like you could straighten it out. Like you see that, you know, like people put like a scaffolding, you know, to make the tree grow straight or whatever. But then once the tree reaches a certain point of development, you can't change it. Either it's very hard to change it, or if you try changing it, it breaks. You know. So he's got the youth has. He said also. Also is also written. Ivelis kshur b'lev naar. Foolishness is tied to the heart of the naar. Shevet muser yachikena mimenu. The staff of discipline, the rod of discipline will distance him from it. So he's got two things going for him. He's under the influence of someone who can influence him, and he's at the stage of youth where there's still a certain flexibility in his nature. But once he gets out from under that influence, and once he grows in years, then he can harden into a seal. So it would seem to be that you can't, by these definitions, you can't have a young seal.
Unless he doesn't have.
Well, even then, he still has that flexibility. So
a lot of it sounds like it's coming from a place of not being able to distinguish between your intellectual thinking and your emotional.
So that's definitely the starting point, right? That's definitely the starting point of the Kseel that we said that the Kseel comes from, you know, we all start off as a Pesi. So the way it's going here is we all start off as a Pesi, okay? Those who are under good influences from a good father don't stray into the naar territory or the Kseel territory. They're just put on a good path. You know, you become a Pesi, then I guess you would become an Arum, because that's what the Pesi gets, is cunning, and then you become a Chacham, then you become a Navon and a Tzaddik. But then if you are a Pesi and you start being involved in something bad, so then that could become a naar. But as long as you're still young and under the influence of someone who can influence you, whether that be your literal father, your Shlomo father, you know, an authority figure, Rebbe, coach, what, you know, like it doesn't have to be like a literal father. So then that will keep you in the stage of naar, and there's still hope. But then once you leave and grow older, you'll become a kseel, because your actions that you've been doing will become second nature, and you'll do them constantly. And at that point, you can't be rebuked. The only way you can change is if you, like, you know, in that area of taiva, hit some sort of rock bottom, and realize that you need to change. But it can't come from the outside, because once it comes from outside, then you'll block it out.
Do you have to hit rock bottom? Can you, like, I don't know how this would happen, but like just realize that this is that.
Yeah, it's possible. It's just very rare to do that without suffering a consequence, because since this all emerged, I think this is a new insight I'm getting now also, since it all emerged from a Pesi way of thinking, then as long as it still feels good, you will perceive it as being good. So I think it has to be that either you're not getting the good from it, or you get something really bad from it. I think it's gonna be very hard for you to, like, intellectually realize, like, intellectual realizations are not gonna break you out of the relating to the thing as good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that was a really good.
That's cool.
That was a really good portrait of these personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
also very I don't know, like nice feeling to me that you're still getting like insights into these personalities.
Oh yeah,
You're,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
still
yeah. I
learning.
mean, it's definitely yeah. I'm glad that you know, that we have Mufarkim who actually like you know, speak in such explicit terms. 'Cause this is the thing. Like this is the, you know, I love different Mufarkim for different reasons. Like I love Matsudas David, but you're never gonna get Matsudas David to go into it like this. You know, Meiri, yeah. You know, Rabag sometimes. Rabbeinu Yonah, yeah. But like, you know, so it's good. Yeah, where would we be without these? Okay. So now let's go back to our pasuk. Okay. Our pasuk says, Leitz take Pesi yarim. Okay, so let the Hofiach Navon Yavin Das. So I think we can explain the first half, right? If you use 1925,
Yeah.
if you hit a Pesi, then the you hit a Leitz, the Pesi will become cunning. So first of all, why are you hitting the Leitz?
You think it's gonna work?
So that's one possibility. You think it's going to work, but given what Rabbeinu Yonah said, it does not seem like that's going to work.
Just to show so that the Pesi can become cunning.
Yeah,
Like
sounds like plain shot is yeah.
But he's not getting away with it.
That the Leitz is not getting away with it, or the Pesi sees that the Leitz is not getting away with it.
That's the Leitz of it.
Yeah, right. So in other words, I don't think you're going to change the Leitz. It's possible that you will stop him. I mean, look, the Leitz clearly the puzzle is assuming a scenario where someone has dominion over the Leitz with at least the ability to punish him. So it's possible you'll stop him from doing the action. Like let's say, for example, you have a Leitz in high school who's constantly bullying a kid verbally, right? That's what a Leitz would do, right? So in a school scenario, you can have a severe enough anti-bullying policy that you will stop the Leitz from engaging in that behavior as long as the threat of punishment looms over him. But you're not going to change his nature of bullying. But the Pesi can become cunning from this. And it's interesting that it says Pesi Yarim, right? So what's that going to look like? So the Pesi sees the Leitz engage in an act of Leitzanus, and then you hit him. Yeah, like that. And how does that give the Pesi Arma?
He recognizes that doing these, like, going down that like emotional, I guess, leads to painful things that he thinks are painful.
Yeah.
And so then, like, he's within his own framework, like, what's like, you know, like what's good and what's bad. Like, you can tell him that you like this is really the path. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, this is going down that path is not going to give you what you want.
Okay, so let me push you one more step. I think this is also like maybe where the Chiddush in the pasuk comes in. Isn't it an artificial consequence though that you're imposing on the Leitz? So how does that? What effect does that have on the Pesi? So yeah, he can now identify that this is a bad path, but he's not seeing the actual consequences of his actions. He's seeing an artificially imposed consequence. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess you could say like, you know, the Pesi does what feels good. Like,
Yeah.
what feels good must be good.
Yeah.
So like, if you see, even though it's an artificial consequence, if you see something bad, it's like, well, that will feel bad. I don't want to feel bad.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try to find something else that will make me feel good.
Yeah.
And by trying to find something else that will make me feel good is like a better shot at coming to like a real good as opposed to just a type of good.
Okay, good. So I think that's the key insight, which is that the effect. So real tochacha or real punishment actually shows you the nature of why this action is bad. So let's say, like, if you see the Leitz suffer the social consequences of making fun of everyone, or you see the psychological consequences of what it does to his character, you know, of giving into his haughtiness and his anger, that would be a real type of tochacha. But this is not a real type of tochacha in the sense that it's an artificial punishment. But that's enough to make the Pesi stop in his tracks and say, oh, I thought there's nothing wrong with making fun of somebody because it feels so good to do that. But I see that there's this consequence, and it helps him to start differentiating and to question his own sense of good and bad, and realize that things that I feel are good will not result in something good for me. And it helps him to then be able to resist that feeling of, oh, if this feels good, then I should do it. You know, what do you say?
Yeah, and not just that, I think that the artificial punishment is even more so than like if like he was like covering socially or something like that, because the whole thing with the Pesi is that he might not be able to recognize that.
Yes.
Because it's just
Too
what
abstract.
kind of happened.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
too abstract for him. He doesn't like see, and he's just like, oh well, it felt good, and no, now he moved on. Okay,
Yeah.
you know, but like he can't really process that.
Yeah.
When he sees the artificial punishment, you
Yeah.
know, the hit or whatever that thing is, that's more tangible for him, and then he can be like, all right, that's bad. I'm gonna go find something else good.
Yeah. That's a good
And
point.
he's able to see
Yeah.
that.
The immediacy of it
Right,
is
he can't
is
distinguish the unraveling of it on his
Yeah.
own.
yeah. I think that's really really good.
Yeah, that's why also why it doesn't matter that it's artificial.
Yes.
Because he's not going to be seeing the artificiality.
Yeah. Right. Right.
He just sees the bad.
Yeah. Exactly. And then I think this now allows us to understand the second half. So what does it mean? Hochiach l'navon yavin das.
Because he can understand.
He can understand, right?
Yeah,
But he,
he can accept the rebuke.
You can rebuke him, which is like showing him what the consequences are going to be.
Right.
And he'll be like constructive.
Yeah, exactly. Now, just one nuance here, which we spent a lot of time this in Perek Yod on Monday nights, but the difference between a Navon and a Chacham is someone who's just receiving. We did this here also, but like receiving knowledge from someone else, whereas a Navon is Yavin Davar Mitoch Davar and understanding new points. So if we assume that's what this is saying, so Chacham would understand the actual consequences. The Chacham is the one that the pasuk is not talking about. Is the Chacham understands the real consequences of this behavior. So what is the Navon going to do above and beyond the Chacham?
Yeah, I don't really understand the distinction.
So Chacham is like, he doesn't arrive at new knowledge on his own, but he can understand what he's taught. So in this context, if you rebuke him for something, then he'll understand how this action leads to bad consequences.
Okay.
Navon is you go beyond that particular thing and you are able to derive new insight and new knowledge. And I'm asking, what would that new knowledge be that the Navon gets?
I mean, not only does, I mean, it could be a lot of things. Like,
Yeah.
not only being late leads to bad consequences, but also anything that, like, you know, like you're, I don't know, like doing any kind of antisocial behavior.
Okay.
related to that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So let's just in the interest of time here, let's just see that in the Rabbeinu Yonah. So in the packet, in the back, okay, you'll see 25 there. Rabbeinu Yonah. I just figured we might as well use this. Sorry, the Rabbeinu Yonah packet. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, did I not give you?
No.
No, I think you.
You're holding it. That's it. No, that's
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Last page. Back. Yeah. Okay. 25. What was that?
Is it different than this?
We'll see. You tell us. It's definitely the better edition though. So he says, Leitz talk about Pesi Yarim. What?
Which one's better?
The Dalet one,
Yeah.
in my experience. Leitz talk about Pesi Yarim. Alpha P should tikva leleitz betochachas. Sorry, should aim tikva leleitz betochachas below b'shevet. Even though there's no hope for the late in rebuke or with the staff, the rod, roy liasra ulhakos. It's still proper to discipline him and hit him. He avar toros v'chala chok. I don't know where that phrase comes from. Oh, from Mishlei. I don't know what that means. Because he's transgressed laws and exchanged a statute. Okay, I don't know what that is. Laman. Okay, why though? Laman yivasru hashomim, in order that the listeners become disciplined, via arimo hapsaim, and the simpletons become cunning. As it says in Devarim, Hanish Arim Yishmu V'Yirau, those who remain will hear and see. And I believe that's about a capital punishment, meaning obviously when you execute someone, it's not for their benefit. It's for the benefit of the onlookers. Okay, so that's consistent with what we said. Okay, but now here's the new part. I'm going to review the Navon. Lo me'asher tochlichenu bilvad yivaser. Not only will he be disciplined when you rebuke him, but he will also be careful about other things on account of what you warned him about. V'yavin b'masav, and he'll understand his actions. V'chapes drachav, and he'll analyze his ways. V'yachkor, and investigate them. V'ra'oso ki nichshal b'davar echad, when he sees that he stumbled in something. V'yira l'nafsho, and he'll fear in his soul. Ula yikrehu avon u'michshal k'mochen b'dvarim acherim, and he'll see that maybe some other obstacle or pitfall will happen in other areas. So in other words, I think that's what you were saying, right? Is that you rebuke him. Let's say you tell him you shouldn't wait for the last minute to study for your test. Okay, and he sees how close he came to a consequence there, and he abstracts and says, okay, well, why did I wait so long? Like, why did I think that I would have time to do this? Why did I misunderstand myself? And then those thoughts will lead to avoiding pitfalls in other areas that the rebuke wasn't about. That's the Yavin, is that he'll apply it to new particulars. Whereas we have 4 people now, right? So the Leitz is disciplined, and it doesn't help him at all unless it's just stopping him from engaging in the action, like while he's under your auspices. The Pesi does not need to suffer the consequence himself. As long as he sees someone else suffering the consequence, it's enough to break him out of that thinking of this is good because it feels good, and to question that, and that leads him on the path to Arma, of starting to question his feeling of his mode of if it feels good, it is good. The Chacham, who's not mentioned in the pasuk, is rebuked and corrects himself in that area, and the Navon, in addition to correcting himself in that area, thinks into the rebuke and thinks into himself, and then applies it to many, many other areas. So he gets the most mileage out of the rebuke.
Wait, you need to explain what where's the Pesi?
The Pesi sees someone else get the consequence, and it causes him to stop in his tracks and say, oh, I thought that this thing is good because it felt good, and I'm realizing it didn't turn out so well. So it gives him the opportunity to differentiate between his intellectual evaluations and his taiva-based evaluations.
So how's it different than the Chacham? The Chacham, like, he gets this particular insight?
I think the Chacham also gets the particular insight, but for the Chacham, the main benefit is the particular insight, because Chacham already knows that you should, that you shouldn't trust your emotions. It's just that he didn't see the consequence in this area. The Pesi is still grappling with this idea of differentiating between the distorted emotional thinking and the rational thinking. So for him, that's the main benefit of the Chacham.
But he sees that there's even a thing like following you.
Yeah, and it's ironic because the Navon and the Pesi are both getting universals, right? The Pesi is getting a universal in terms of the way of operating decision making. The Navon is getting a universal in particular decisions, and the Chacham is just getting the particular decision.
So that's why maybe the pasuk.
Yeah.
Besides the Navon and the Pesi.
Yeah. So in other words, the subject of the pasuk seems to be the broad-reaching applications of Tochacha for different audiences.
Right.
Yeah. And I was gonna say one more thing. Going back to that initial Rashi comment, he says that Paro was stricken by the Makos, and he was by definition in the Leitz category because God hardened his heart. I mean, it sounds like he did that first, but it's not for him to learn. It was for other audiences to be open to the idea, meaning the Egyptians and other nations. Same thing with Amalek. And then Yisro is the one who this was enough to break him out of whatever derech he was on, and to realize, like, oh, this is, I mean, he Ayin Baparshas Yisro, where he says, Ki badavar asher zadu Elohim, and he has the realization that Hashem is the true God, even though he didn't suffer any punishment, but he sees that and he learns from it and he converts, So there's more to think into there, but that's our token connection to Yitzhak and crime. Yeah.
Were you last night when you were talking about Yitzhak? I heard.
Yeah, we were doing the Arba Banim through Mishlei, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a really good, it ended up being a long discussion, but it was a really, really good discussion. I advocate listening to that at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, good.
Cool.
All right, until after Pesach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.